Kiedy wreszcie zlikwidowany zostanie też
When will the team of prosecutors appointed to prosecute Polish border defenders finally be disbanded? The Polish border is sacred, just like the soldiers and officers who guard it, President Karol Nawrocki said during a meeting with the Ministry of Defence and Armed Forces staff at the Warsaw Citadel.
Nie ma i nigdy nie będzie mojej zgody.
I do not and will not consent to such treatment of border guards, Polish soldiers, and the prosecution of Polish soldiers for protecting Poles. The President's declaration and appeal was addressed to Minister of National Defence Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, who was present in the room and who also serves as Deputy Prime Minister in the Polish government. The President's words are a result of the government's actions against soldiers who protect the Polish border and thus protect the safety of citizens from illegal migrants sent by Łukaszenko and Putin.
Dwóch migrantów nielegalnie przekroczyło granicę.
Two migrants crossed the border illegally. They had already committed a crime by illegally crossing our border. One of them directly attacked our soldier. The soldier's life and health were in danger, so he defended himself against this aggressive migrant's attack by all means possible. Such situations are the norm during hybrid warfare. The state must stand behind Polish soldiers and not handcuff them, which approach is not evident in the actions of the government and the prosecutor's office, Karol Nawrocki noted, while declaring his support for border defenders.
Ochrona Polaków nie jest przekroczeniem.
Protecting Poles is not an abuse of power. I know that Polish army soldiers use weapons in a professional manner, in accordance with the law and ethical principles, and in the safest way possible. I will not tolerate any illegal actions by prosecutors against Polish army soldiers. Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz echoed the president during his speech. I also dislike the actions of the prosecutor's office, which, in my opinion, is overzealous in its approach to this type of activity. However, he refrained from making any declarations. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your speech. Tusk and Jurek have room to shine here, but unfortunately, they are nowhere to be seen. It is worth remembering that Polish soldiers protecting the Polish border with Belarus are also protecting the eastern frontier of NATO and the European Union. They are on the front line. The armed forces have fulfilled their constitutional duties. The President's philosophy that soldiers should be the center of attention was shared by the Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Army. The last line of effort was dedicated to the most valuable part of our organization, our people, who deserve the best conditions of service and equipment. The equipment of the Polish Army, as well as the implementation of conclusions from, for example, the war in Ukraine, was another topic of today's event. Poland is a cyclical target of airspace violations by Russian unmanned aerial vehicles and balloons. We are constantly monitoring and responding to violations of Polish airspace, currently mainly by balloons, but also by drones. In order to achieve the expected results, to stop and neutralize the oppression on the state's borders, it is necessary to continue not only military actions, but also to intensify the use of diplomatic and economic instruments. I am doing this on the international stage, but here we need even more joint effort. And looking at the actions of the Polish government, this is not always the case. A lack of coordination between the relevant units and communication. We saw this after the September attack on Polish airspace. We need to speed things up, explained the president. Not all of the important lessons learned from the war in Ukraine are being effectively implemented. And there will be more challenges. However, our own and our allies' intelligence data indicate that Russia is developing its potential for conventional warfare with NATO. That is why it is so important to maintain the alliance with the United States.
Thank you very much.
This is a guarantee of stability in our region. It is necessary to consider increasing the presence of US forces in Poland. It is therefore necessary to develop a new security strategy in which units will not be disbanded and the country's defence will not be established on the Vistula River, as it was during Donald Tusk's first term in office. Long live the Polish army, long live the Polish soldier, long live Poland.
Yesterday evening, U.S. President Donald Trump delivered his annual address to a joint session of Congress. The speech focused on economic issues, border security, and foreign policy. What other aspects did the American president highlight?
President of the United States!
The annual State of the Union address stems directly from the U.S. Constitution. For over 100 years, it has been a tradition for the president to deliver the address in person at a joint session of Congress. This year's address by Donald Trump was the longest to date.
This is the golden age of America.
The American president spoke about his administration's achievements in the first year of his second term, as well as his plans for the coming years.
Our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before. Less than 5 months from now, our country will celebrate an epic milestone in American history, the 250th anniversary of our glorious American independence.
Donald Trump devoted most of his speech to American domestic policy, including the economy, healthcare, and energy prices. The American president also spoke about tariffs on imports to the United States.
I used these tariffs, took in hundreds of billions of dollars to make great deals for our country, both economically and on a national security basis. Everything was working well. Countries that were ripping us off for decades are now paying us hundreds of billions of dollars.
President Donald Trump devoted much of his speech to security policy, including tensions in the Middle East and Venezuela.
In January, elite American warriors carried out one of the most complex, spectacular feats of military competence and power in world history. No one's seen anything like it. Foreign leaders, I won't tell you who, called me and they said, very impressive.
President Trump announced that the United States will further increase its military budget to defend its security and be able to respond anywhere in the world.
We have the most powerful military on earth. I rebuilt the military in my first term. We're going to continue to do so. Also, we just approved a $1 trillion budget. We have no choice.
Many Americans watched the president's speech this way, in bars or movie theaters.
I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, clearly, it's already being reported that it's the longest State of the Union in American history, and I think that's for the main reason that America is back.
I thought it was amazing. I really enjoyed hearing the president speak. I've always been a big fan of him, and I admire the hard work he does for our country.
The address is also an opportunity to honor representatives of the U.S. Armed Forces. The Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States, was awarded to a pilot who became famous for his solo battle against 7 Soviet aircraft during the Korean War.
His story was secret for over 50 years. He didn't even want to tell his wife, but the legend grew and grew. But tonight, at 100 years old, this brave Navy captain is finally getting the recognition he deserves. He was a legend long before this evening.
Among those invited to President Trump's speech were American hockey players. A few days ago at the Olympics in Italy, the American team won the gold medal that the U.S. had been waiting for so long. For 2 minutes, they received a standing ovation from everyone in attendance, which the American president jokingly summed up by pointing to the Democratic representatives and saying the following.
That's the first time I've ever seen them get up.
Just a few hours before the airstrike, there were few indications that the United States would decide to carry out such an operation. The strike, carried out as part of Operation Midnight Hammer, came as a surprise to many observers and was intended to show that Washington was ready to use force quickly. From the outset, the U.S. authorities emphasized that the aim was to limit Iran's military capabilities and send a deterrent signal to its allies in the region. Since then, the situation has been developing not in analyses, but in successive concrete military and political moves. President Donald Trump emphasizes that diplomacy remains his preferred solution, while clearly drawing a line on Iran's nuclear program.
My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Iran wants to maintain its ability to enrich uranium for energy purposes, according to the authorities in Tehran. However, Washington knows full well that Iran is conducting advanced work on building its own bomb, and that the alleged energy program is merely a cover, hence the growing pressure, which has so far failed to yield results in the negotiations.
He's I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon.
On the other hand, the Iranian authorities declare that they will not bow to pressure and warn that negotiations cannot be used as a tool for political games. Regardless of these threats, Iran remains committed to defending its national interests and the rights of the Iranian people. If we find that the other side is using the negotiation process to mislead us, we will certainly take the appropriate position. The rhetoric on both sides shows how tense the situation remains. Although the American president's latest speech was more measured, experts emphasize that the risk of escalation is still real.
The president was measured when it came to the conflict in Iran. He definitely didn't saber rattle. He didn't make threats. This is a different Donald Trump than we've seen on social media and from the statements from the White House. That probably gave the American people a little bit of a sigh of relief, but it doesn't absolve the fact that this is still a very hot situation. And the president has to convince people that this is in the nation's best interest.
Intensive international consultations are underway in the region. It is no coincidence that the Indian Prime Minister has just arrived in Israel. Officially, it is for economic and security cooperation, but the timing has diplomats analysing it in the context of tension surrounding Iran and Delhi's exploration of the possible scale of the conflict looming in the air. At the same time, talks are being prepared in Geneva, which some observers describe as a last chance and an attempt to stop further escalation. Their outcome may determine whether the conflict remains in the realm of political pressure or begins to move into the next phase of confrontation.
For decades, it had been the policy of the United States never to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Many decades. Since they seized control of that proud nation 47 years ago, the regime and its murderous proxies have spread nothing but terrorism and death and hate.
The American president also argued that despite earlier warnings, Iran is still trying to rebuild its military capabilities and continues to engage in activities that Washington considers a threat.
And just over the last couple of months with the protests, they've killed at least, it looks like, 32,000 protesters. 32,000 protesters in their own country. They shot them and hung them. We stopped them from hanging a lot of them with the threat of serious violence. But this is some terrible people. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe.
The United States will not allow this, and if intelligence indicates a potential risk, they will strike preemptively. In recent days, Western media have also warned of a possible wave of retaliatory strikes around the world by terrorist groups supported by Iran. Tehran may take a step back and the Americans may accept a concession as a prelude to an agreement. For now, however, there are no signs of a breakthrough.